but now we are on the phone with Shannon Drayer, covers the Seattle Mariners for ESPN 710 in Seattle. Shannon, I am a diehard Mariners fan transplanted here in the Northeast. I want to ask you all kinds of questions about James Paxton's arm and Taijuan Walker's foot, but I have to refrain. We'll start with Ichiro, his 3,000th hit. What was the reaction like yesterday at Safeco Field when they showed it up on the big board for the former Mariner?
It was pretty cool. It actually happened in the ninth inning, and things obviously got a little bit dramatic in the ninth if you were watching, and Paxton got hurt. So the Mariners, obviously, they weren't going to play it live on the big board. They've got a big board there, too, during the game. But as soon as the game ended and the Mariners were walking off the field and having their victory handshake and high fives, they put it up on the board there. And it was very cool because it was packed house this weekend. It was Ken Griffey Jr., jersey and number induction retirement ceremony weekend. So they had 3 nights of 40,000 plus and just raucous crowds. And Ichiro is still very beloved in the Seattle area. So they showed the hit up on the big screen there, and the fans reacted. The players stopped. They were walking out to the mound to do their handshakes and high fives, turned around, watched it, and applauded. Felix Hernandez kind of led the whole thing. He was one of Ichiro's teammates. And it was just really cool to see. I was talking to Mike Zunino. I was getting ready to interview him on the field when they did this. And Zunino, of course, wasn't on the team when Ichiro was there. But he said, it's a history thing. And I think that they were really kind of feeling having Griffey there for 3 days and what he did in the Mariners uniform, and then to see what Ichiro did. I think that hit a lot of them, that even though the Mariners don't have a World Series and even though it's been a miserable 15 years for them, there were some pretty incredible teams and performances in Mariners uniforms. So it was really neat to see both the fans' reactions and the current players' reactions as well.
Shannon, you've been covering the Mariners for 20 years. A bulk of those, Ichiro was right in town. Where does he rack up in your own mind of the great players that you've seen in Major League Baseball?
Wow. That's a tough one. I mean, he certainly is a different player. Ken Griffey Jr. is at the absolute top of the list, and Felix Hernandez in his early days is way up there as well. But he's the only player that I've covered that had 3,000. Oh, Edgar Martinez, of course, as far as right-handed hitters go. I don't think I've seen a better one. But what Ichiro was able to do, it wasn't just the numbers that he put up. What he did was historic. I mean, he was the first Japanese position player to come over, and in addition to having to come over and perform and play, he had to prove a lot of people wrong. A lot of people didn't believe that he would be able to come over here and really be anything more than a 250 hitter and, a light-hitting 250 hitter at that. And to see him go out night after night after night, particularly in 2001, 2002, 2003, and 4, and just, how did he get that hit? And all of a sudden he's on first base again. And basically anything that was put on the ground, he was going to be on first base. And it was absolutely amazing to watch what happened at game time, but it was also amazing to watch what happened before and after the game time and just see his preparation and what went into being able to do what he was able to do. And the last thing is just I have a real great admiration for what he did in that he came over with all of the eyes of Japan on him. He was a huge celebrity when he came over here, and the media coverage was beyond ridiculous. I mean, the Mariners, when they built Safeco Field, they built this giant press box that they had since shrunk in half, and it was full when Ichiro was there in the first few years. And to see him have to do that with all of the eyes and all of the cameras on him and, know that anything he did or said was going to be front page news in Japan the next day was huge. But then to come over here and to have that and to prove the doubters wrong and to do it the way that he did, in that he didn't change to try and accommodate Major League Baseball or the style of play. He brought his game here, and it translated.
Shannon Drayer, ESPN 710 in Seattle, covers the Seattle Mariners. And what kind of guy is Ichiro, Shannon? Because, we in the Northeast know him from his time with the Yankees, but he's a guy no one really ever got to know. The language barrier, just quiet guy. What kind of guy is Ichiro?
Well, I think he's a guy that, like everybody, has evolved quite a bit over the years. I think that, and I don't think the language was an issue with teammates for very long. I think he was fluent within a few years. I know he was fluent within a few years of getting here. I think that using the interpreter for anything that he did with the media, kind of served two purposes. And the first being any player that I've ever covered before or been around, I've never seen a player that was just hypersensitive to whatever he said. He wanted to make sure not only came out right, but was interpreted right. And he wanted to make sure that people understood what he was saying and the meaning behind it. And so that was obviously a little bit different and more difficult as English was a second language, even when he was fluent. So he made sure that, his words were interpreted. And I can't tell you how many times that there were interview situations, be it one-on-one or be it with a group, where the interpreter would come running around the corner afterwards and say, he just wanted to make sure that you understood this. Sure. And so that was part of it. But the other thing is we did get to know him. I mean, he was a lot more upfront once the reporters were out of the room. He was a good teammate for many years to a lot of his teammates. Players like Raul Ibanez were good friends with him. So it was there. He just didn't show it as much with others.
Shannon, from one of the icons of baseball and Mariners baseball to one of the former icons of Mariners baseball, Alex Rodriguez, really dominating our show today. And Zach, you said Shannon covered the Mariners for 20 years. I wrote 20. It's actually 17, so I'll take the hit for that one. But so you got into Seattle right as the time A-Rod was leaving. What was your reaction to hearing Alex Rodriguez was going to walk away from at least the Yankees last night? And what's the sentiment about A-Rod in the city?
Well, the sentiment of A-Rod in the city has not been good for a long time. I mean, they saw it as a money grab when he went to Texas, which would be one thing if he just came out at the beginning and, wow, this is going back so far, and it's still at top of mind for a lot of people. But, he made a big show of saying, he wanted to stay in Seattle. And he had the Mariners organization jump through all sorts of hoops to try and keep him there. He wanted things like he wanted to play golf with Bill Gates, and they set that up. There were all sorts of, he was really kind of leading them on a little bit. Now, you're not going to fault anybody for taking an offer that was basically double what the best offer from the Mariners was, which would have been the highest contract they had ever given anybody at that time. But people in the Northwest didn't appreciate that. They, of course, when he came back with the Texas Rangers, booed him, threw dollar bills at him. And that wasn't just the first time. That went on for a long time. So I think that they look at him as somebody that, you left and you kind of let us on before you left. So they weren't too happy with that. He's not looked at terribly favorably here. And, people really look at him again, and this is kind of sad, and this is what I get from A-Rod. And I was a fan of A-Rod's before I got this job, and I remember him coming up through the minor leagues, and I remember him playing in his first 2 years before he got regular playing time with the Mariners. And he was a beautiful baseball player, totally different. He was a 6'3" shortstop who was graceful. He stole 40 bases. The A-Rod we think of now is the one who was hitting the home runs and, got into the PED trouble and everything else. But he was a tremendous athlete when he came up, and he changed as he went on. But, for him, it was, you talk about hard getting to know Ichiro. It was impossible getting to know A-Rod. He tried to control everything with the image, and he came off as phony. It was always about trying to say the right thing and with nothing behind it. And Northwest people saw right through that, and, for that, he never connected with the fans here.
Shannon Drayer, ESPN 710 in Seattle, covers the Seattle Mariners, has for 17 years. Shannon, and I was reading, as I told you, I'm a diehard Mariners fan. I was reading a Mariners blog, Lookout Landing, which I know you know well. So the question about A-Rod is going to be, can he get into the into the National Baseball Hall of Fame? And I think the jury is very much out on that. Is there a scenario where down the line, A-Rod gets into the Mariners Hall of Fame? Would the organization welcome him back that way? Would the fans welcome him back that way in the way that they, just celebrated Ken Griffey Jr. this weekend?
No. I think he would have a better chance of getting into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Really?
And that's not as much. He wasn't with the Mariners very long. You look at his career and you think it's funny because he's kind of a guy, because I know that there was angst for the Yankees fans, and there surely was with Rangers fans as well. He's a guy that's had, he's put up all the numbers, yet I don't think that there is an organization that embraces him easily and comfortably. There's something that goes with it. So that's, very odd for what he did on the baseball field. But he wasn't, in truth, with the Mariners very long. He left them, and he left them with, I think, some bad feelings on the ownership part at the time. And again, as I said, the fans, they never embraced him like Griffey. He never, kind of gave of himself the way that Griffey did. So, had he stayed, sure, they would have. Seattle loves its sports heroes, but no, I would see him in the Baseball Hall of Fame before. I don't see them putting him up at, with an Edgar Martinez, with a Randy Johnson, with a Ken Griffey Jr., with a Jamie Moyer, and a Dan Wilson, and a Jay Buhner. I mean, these guys are guys that, for the most part, have stayed in the community, and they are guys that had no controversy around them whatsoever. And A-Rod is kind of a different story, and that's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be huge. He wanted to kind of transcend the game, and he did in negative ways quite often.
Shannon, I am very jealous of you that you got to be in Seattle for Ken Griffey Jr. Celebration weekend this weekend, but I was in Cooperstown a few weeks ago at his induction into the Hall of Fame, wearing my hat backwards and my Griffey t-shirt jersey, and I wanted to be a fan for a day like I was when I was living in Seattle watching Griffey. You were there as well. What did you make of the experience of being in Cooperstown, and kind of how did that compare to what went on this past weekend in Seattle?
It was really cool being in Cooperstown. I've visited there before, not for an induction week, but to, again, as I mentioned, the Mariners, they don't have a World Series. They've had a real tough 15 years. And, to get into Cooperstown and see Mariners jerseys everywhere and to see baseball fans everywhere. You hear, the game gets beat up so often about, kids aren't playing it anymore and NFL is number one and nobody's watching it. And then to get there and, to see people setting up their seats on the lawn the night before and to turn around when we're at the ceremony and see 50,000 baseball fans, be it Mets fans, be it Mariners fans, just 50,000 people that cared to get all the way there and see this moment, this historic moment, I thought was absolutely spectacular. And then to see, Junior and Piazza, they both just gave such moving speeches and they were both so appreciative of the honor, and it's a tough few days for them. They put them through a grueling schedule of appearances and everything that they have to do, and they were both so gracious about it. It was just, a wonderful celebration, not of just the two individuals, but of the game and the way that it was played and the day that those guys played.
Shannon Drayer, ESPN 710 in Seattle. A lot going on in the Northwest and a lot of connections with that to the Northeast as well. Ichiro, former Mariner, former Yankee, his 3,000th hit. Alex Rodriguez, former Mariner, soon to be a former Yankee, will play his last game with the Pinstripes on Friday. Shannon, thanks a lot. Continued success and keep up the good work.
Thank you, guys.